You can't say that every single time. Number one, Israel moves the sun. No. Well, here's what Israel does: false flags, and they kill a bunch of people, and they kill their own people.
Yeah.
So that scumbags like him, like, this is unreal. It's like there was somebody was.
All right, folks. This is just getting out of control. Now, there's a lot of questions surrounding the tragedy of Charlie Kirk in recent days. People talking about who was the shooter, where did he come from, what's the origin story, and of course, as with every conspiracy, there's a place for Israel. And in this case, the silence is not at all there. People are talking, and here we're going to just jump right into the Jimmy Dore show, known for being anti-Israel, has some questions, and we're going to go through it. As you know, at the Israel Observer, we observe and we react. And if someone has a legitimate question about Israel, we will respond to it with facts. And so, let's take a listen.
Internet rumors that somehow Israel is behind the Charlie Kirk murder, and I don't believe it for 1 second, but I want you to make a statement. It's so absurd.
That's insane. Israel also changes the orbit of the moon. Israel pushes the sun. I mean, the whole thing is not only insane. I think it's so absurd, so stupid, and so ridiculous. You can't believe that people are saying that they just found the perpetrator.
I am your guest host, Missy Winston. Apologies for not being Jimmy Dore. We are going to move on now to talk about an article that just came out in the Grayzone by Max Blumenthal and Anya Parapel, who are...
Okay, very quickly, before these two experts over here talk about the Grayzone. So, we just saw the denial from Bibi. In fact, the things that he has to deal with this, he just laughed at how absurd this was. And then you saw the Jimmy Dore assistants over here were also started laughing for opposite reasons. But look at this image over here on the screen. A Trump insider and a longtime friend Charlie Kirk, blah, blah. Okay, so read what it says, okay? Backlash from Netanyahu's allies left him angry and afraid, blah, blah. Okay, just from the outset, we see an unnamed insider and an unnamed longtime friend, okay? And on the left, we see a headline, Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu funding offer. Was frightened by pro-Israel forces before death, friend reveals. Okay, this is an unnamed source. So this would not pass even 5 seconds of an entry to a courtroom. This is just absurd. But let's just hear what these experts over here have to say. Let's just hear what they have to say.
Are fantastic. And this is that Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu funding offer and was frightened by pro-Israel forces before death, friend reveals. Now, you can think whatever you want to think about whether or not Israel's responsible for this or they're not, but I do think that what is very telling about...
Just to stop right there. She said you can think whatever you want, but this thing is very telling. So, what we noticed, we watched this previously, this video, this is just a lot of smoke that they're placing here, but not a single shred of evidence. So just keep that in mind as you watch this. Not a single shred of evidence. Two people who hate Israel on the left, the cowboy guy with the glasses, the assistant secretary on the top left, they hate Israel. They hate them. And so, they're pulling things that might have a semblance of passing truth, and they're equating it and conflating it with evidence. And so just keep that in mind, folks.
What's happening right now is that they have very clearly lost control over the narrative and over their image, and immediately people are willing to question them on this, and I think that that's at least something good, is that now...
You're right 9 times out of 10. Probably 10 times out of 10.
Right? Did Israel do it? Probably yes. Yeah.
They just show there's literally no rule that they obey.
Yeah, but...
I mean, North Korea rogue nation? Really?
Yeah, they're really out of control. So a Trump insider and longtime friend of Charlie Kirk tells the Grayzone how the assassinated conservative leader's turning point on Israel influence provoked a private backlash from Netanyahu's allies that left him angry and afraid. The source said anxiety spread within the Trump administration after an apparent Israeli spying operation was uncovered. Charlie Kirk rejected an offer earlier this year from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to arrange a massive new infusion of Zionist money into his Turning Point USA organization, America's largest conservative youth association, according to a longtime friend of the slain commentator speaking on the condition of anonymity. The source told the Grayzone that the late pro-Trump influencer believed Netanyahu was trying to cow him into silence as he began to publicly...
Okay, so this is interesting, and let's talk about this. Once again, no evidence of who is saying this, right? The Grayzone reports this as fact. We'll get into the Grayzone in a second, by the way. Okay, actually, you know what? We'll take this opportunity to just pivot for a second. 1 second. The Grayzone, okay? Check this out. This is Haaretz, okay? Haaretz is the most left-wing publication in Israel, to the point that they're considered essentially anti-Israel by the right wing, would say that, okay? So we have the most liberal, left-wing, woke type of media in Israel, And even they have said that Max Blumenthal, the Grayzone editor, okay, are lying about Israel. So I just want to understand who is being quoted here. So going back to the video, this offer, the Grayzone reports this as fact. I don't even know where they got this from. But once again, no evidence, no names given. Just, oh yeah, reject an offer. Now I'm going to go out of my element here, and I'm going to say, okay, you know what? Let's just say this is true. Let's just say that this false statement is true. Okay, we're open to any sort of evidence. This is not evidence. This is speculation and made up by the Grayzone. They tend to lie about Israel. And let's just say that Charlie Kirk indeed rejected an offer from Netanyahu in which he would have gotten Zionist. Okay, I love how they say Zionist money. It's money from Netanyahu. So there are these little bell whistle, dog whistle code words that are put into the text here by the Grayzone. But okay, let's just say Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu would write a check and give it to Turning Point USA. Okay? And if we skip to the bottom here, Netanyahu believed that Netanyahu was trying to cow him into silence. Okay, blah, blah. Let's just say this is true. You know what I say back to that? So what? Everyone does this. Qatar has given $2 billion to American universities to try and indoctrinate American youth. This is how it works. People are upset about AIPAC, and that's fine. You should be upset about AIPAC, by all means. And go vote against it. Go write a letter to your congressman. But let's just say this is true. Could you blame a foreign government for trying to influence somebody? So let's just say this is true. The evidence to get from this to murder is insane. We continue.
Questioned Israel's overwhelming influence in Washington and demanded more space to criticize it. In the weeks leading up to his September 10th assassination, Kirk had come to loathe the Israeli leader, regarding him as a quote-unquote bully. The source said, that's saying it lightly. Kirk was disgusted by what he witnessed inside the Trump administration, where Netanyahu sought to personally dictate the president's personnel decisions and weaponize Israeli assets like billionaire donor Miriam Adelson to keep the White House firmly under its thumb.
Okay, once again, let's just assume this is true. At standard, any foreign government, any prime minister or president is trying to influence the president of the United States. That's how it works. They can say no, right? They tried with Obama and it didn't work. We moved on. Obama wasn't assassinated. These people are nuts.
According to Kirk's friend, who also enjoyed access to President Donald Trump and his inner circle, Kirk strongly warned Trump last June against bombing Iran on Israel.
That's speculation. There's no... In fact, Charlie Kirk got heat because he was one of the few MAGA people who didn't criticize it. And by the way, there are people who criticize it. How come they weren't assassinated, right? Charlie Kirk stayed the party line. He stayed with Trump. Charlie Kirk's, you could say his politics is he's pro-Trump, right? He's been pro-Trump every step of the way with the MAGA stuff, with the anti-woke stuff, with the anti-Antifa stuff, anti-immigration. And you know what? Pro-Israel, but also willing to criticize Israel. Put it this way. If Israel wanted to assassinate someone, there are much bigger fish to fry than Charlie Kirk. It just doesn't make any sense why they would choose. So, and this is just, even to speculate that is to give it some credence. This whole show, these Jimmy Dore secretaries are clowns, uneducated, and spewing false information.
Israel's behalf. Quote, Charlie was the only person who did that. They said, recalling how Trump barked at him in response and angrily shut down the...
That's just, who's quoting this? We need a source. The minute that the Grayzone liars can produce a source, we can now accept it. There's no source, no evidence.
Conversation. The source believes the incident confirmed in Kirk's mind that the president of the United States had fallen under control of a malign foreign power and was leading his own country into a series of disastrous conflicts. By the following month, Kirk had become the target of a sustained private campaign of intimidation and free-floating fury by wealthy and powerful allies of Netanyahu, figures he described in an interview as Jewish leaders and stakeholders. He was afraid of them.
Once again, not a single source. This is just, I mean, look, this is great YouTube fodder to build an audience of anti-Israel people, probably anti-Semitic people, but not a shred of evidence.
The source emphasized. Kirk was 18 years old when he launched TPUSA in 2012. From its inception, his career was propelled by Zionist donors who showered his young organization with money through neoconservative outfits, like the David Horowitz Freedom Center.
Okay, quick interlude here, just to show how foolish these people are. This secretary over here, David Horowitz, they called him a neoconservative. David Horowitz, look him up. David Horowitz is considered left of center in Israel. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of the Times of Israel. Look it up. He founded them in 2012 as a left-wing counter to the Jerusalem Post, which is right-wing. Okay, you can look this up. To call David Horowitz a neoconservative is somewhere between funny, comical, and incorrect. David Horowitz himself will be the first person to say that he is a centrist. Now, right-wing people would call him probably left of center, but he's, a shred to the left. To call him a neoconservative is comical. Believe me, there's other people who would be legitimate to call them neoconservatives. There are, but he is not the guy. And so, this is just, once again, false information.
He repaid his wealthy backers over the years by unleashing a relentless fire hose of anti-Palestinian and Islamophobic diatribes, accepting propaganda trips to Israel, and sternly shutting down nationalist forces challenging his support for Israel.
Okay, so clearly these two people on the left, these secretaries, have never actually watched Charlie Kirk, or at least not enough. Charlie Kirk has put out hundreds of hours of videos talking about his love for Israel, and to understand why, he says it. He says, by the way, he doesn't just love Israel for no reason. He was the first person to say that Israel is the only country in the Middle East protecting Christian historical assets. Charlie Kirk appreciated the fact that he could walk into Israel and visit where Jesus walked, where Jesus was born. And he said that Muslim countries, especially the neighboring countries of Israel, Syria, Lebanon, right, Hezbollah, are not protecting Christian assets. In fact, they've destroyed them, ISIS also in particular. Israel is one of the few places in the Middle East which is protecting Judeo-Christian values, of course, and Christian historical landmarks. And that is the engine for his pro-Israel love. And also, he's also willing to criticize Israel. But all this stuff over here, it's just totally false information and no evidence.
During TPUSA events. In the Trump era, few American Gentiles had proved more valuable to the self-proclaimed Jewish state than Charlie Kirk, but as Israel's genocidal assault on the besieged Gaza Strip drove an unprecedented backlash within grassroots right-wing circles, where only 24% of younger Republicans now sympathize with Israel over the Palestinians, Kirk began to shift. At times, he towed the Israeli line, spreading disinformation about babies beheaded by Hamas on October 7th and denying the famine imposed on the population of Gaza. Yet he's...
Okay, so the disinformation about babies being beheaded by Hamas, there's a 42-minute video that you can watch that Israel did not release to the public. It's only for the media. Obviously, these two secretaries from Jimmy Dore show were not qualified to receive permission to watch that video, but you can watch it and you can decide for yourself what sort of disinformation is out there regarding October 7th. Regarding the famine imposed on the population of Gaza, I mean, it was imposed by the Hamas terrorists who run Gaza, who receive aid and hide in warehouses. But the Jeffrey Epstein thing, watch what they say about Epstein. We're going to get to that right now.
Simultaneously ceded to his base, wondering aloud if Jeffrey Epstein was an Israeli intelligence asset, questioning whether the Israeli government allowed the October 7th attacks to proceed in order to advance long-term political goals, and parroting narratives familiar to his most vociferous critic on the right, streamer Nick.
Okay, so to have questions about Epstein, that's fine. There's a lot of people who had questions about Epstein. And by the way, if you think Mossad and Epstein are connected, that's fine. You can make that argument. And there are actually, unlike everything they just said until now, there are actually legitimate connections. Now, personally, we think it's ridiculous because why would the Mossad choose a guy with the most Jewish name in history? Epstein is a top 10 American Jewish name. Mossad is a little smarter than that, right? They're on the one hand, they're saying that the Mossad pulled off an assassination. On the other hand, they're saying that the Mossad chose the most Jewish guy to be their asset. It doesn't really make any sense. Nobody with a brain would believe that. But I think it's fair. Also, Megyn Kelly, by the way, Megyn Kelly, very similar politics to Charlie Kirk, pro-Israel, but asking questions, and that's fine. Now they're about to show Charlie Kirk's question on October 7th, the readiness of the IDF, and we're going to respond to that. Watch.
Heads. So here is Charlie Kirk questioning October 7th, and this is something I also questioned the day that it happened for reasons that Charlie explains here. Israel is a fortress. Oh, come on now. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, I lost it.
Not the sharpest tool.
Hold, please. I lost that video. It just disappeared.
Not the sharpest.
The whole country.
Oh, there it goes.
When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that's an IDF soldier. Right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel was on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu was basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far as saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here, but I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand-down order? Was there a stand-down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it.
What?
Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. 6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say, stand down? That is a legitimate,
Okay, so by the way, this is a legitimate non-conspiracy question. It is. And it's been debated, and it's being investigated internally within Israel, and I'm sure by foreign intelligence outfits as well, who wanted to understand what happened. Where was the idea for 6 hours? Now, the answer, and there's public records, right? The IDF responded immediately. However, this happened on a holiday. It was a quiet time. They were not anticipating anything, and the issue was that the IDF had to respond to dozens and dozens of areas which were being attacked simultaneously. Hamas pulled off a very successful attack. If you read hour by hour, minute by minute, what they did in terms of attacking the surveillance areas, coming in from the sky, the sea, land, jeeps, cars, paragliders, it was almost a perfect storm. And there were a lot of points of attack. And the IDF did respond. It just took a while because people were coming from their homes. Reservists were being called up. So Charlie Kirk, I mean, these are legitimate questions. It's fine to ask these questions. I believe he was wrong. These are fair questions. I don't think he's being assassinated because he asked these questions. That's the trick the Jimmy Dore show does, and these other anti-Israel lackeys. What they're doing is they find, a little bit of smoke and they make it into this like concrete evidence. It's fair to ask questions about October 7th and the 6 hours that it took for the IDF to take control of the situation. But if you notice, Charlie Kirk says that he went from Tel Aviv to Gaza in 45 minutes. That is correct. Now, 300,000 reservists were called up by the IDF. It took 3 hours, 4 hours for a lot of them to get to their base and then to respond. So, folks, it's just a bit of a stretch, if you ask me.
conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is. And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools and by report.
Yes, and that is a very valid question. Was it allowed to happen?
Well, of course, now, of course it was allowed to happen on purpose. We know what happens when things get tough for Netanyahu. He'll kill anybody. He'll kill Jews on October 7th. And he'll have his what's the guy, Gallant? Who's the guy who ordered Hannibal Directive? They asked him on TV. Yeah. And then him and Bibi get in a fight because Bibi's too crazy even for him, I guess. Yeah. And then he comes out, yeah, it was given a little bit. The whole country's the IDF. So that means the Hannibal Directive, they killed their own people. So if they do that to Israeli Jews, if that's what the IDF...
Okay, so what he's referencing right now is the Hannibal Directive, which was put out approximately 12 years ago after the last kidnapping, in which there was an opportunity, right, when there's a kidnapping, unfortunately, you can let the kidnappers get away with the assets, whether it's civilians or soldiers, or you can fire at the terrorists and endanger the life of the victim. And this is, this guy over here, the cowboy hat, he doesn't have to worry about because he lives in his air-conditioned office somewhere in America. He doesn't have to worry about this. But in the Middle East, things are different. There's elements of life and death here that these two people don't have to worry about. And what happens in that is, in a situation, you can have a terrorist abduct, let's say an IDF soldier, or in this case, civilians, mothers, grandmothers, babies. And the defense operation, the IDF, has the choice. They can shoot at them, or they can let them get away. And the decision was made to give the IDF freedom of operation to fire at the terrorists and knowingly endanger the lives of the abducted folks in order to minimize the total. Now, this is controversial, but it's understandable from a defensive posture. Now, you could argue for it, you could argue against it, but for this guy over here with the cowboy hat to say, oh, they're killing Jews, I mean, technically, that is a result. If you break it apart piece by piece, yes, Jews are and were killed by the Hannibal Directive, but the caveat there that this guy in the cowboy hat and sunglasses indoors is leaving out, the part he's leaving out is that in addition to that, they're also killing many, many murderous, evil terrorists and preventing future terrorism and preventing kidnappings. And so, yes, it's complicated. But what these people do over here, these two secretaries, they're taking small, pieces of smoke and barely evidence and conflating it to their to their narrative, which is just so blatantly anti-Israel. It's becoming laughable, to be honest.
Would do under orders. What do you think they do to Charlie Kirk at a crucial moment when they just blew up Qatar? One of the biggest crimes I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
And this
One of the biggest crimes you ever heard of. So they didn't blow up Qatar. They attacked with precision the third floor of a building. If they would have knocked down the whole building in Qatar, they would have knocked out the Hamas terrorists. They went after the third floor. They were very careful. They didn't blow up Qatar. They tried to attack and kill the masterminds of October 7th. And so, this, we watched 7 minutes of this interview, and it's just getting more and more stupid. We're going to have to call it in, folks. Just ridiculous.